Good afternoon. I don't know what camera I'm looking at. My name is Anibal David Cabrera, your humble host, and hello and welcome to the Yard Signs, the most important, irrelevant podcast in politics. My name is Anibal David Cabrera, and I will be your host for today's podcast. Again, I'm saying that twice. I am super nervous today. On the docket that we will be talking about, the collapse of the Caribbean in collapse. We'll be talking about Haiti and Cuba and break out more details that we're hearing every single moment. From there, we will be discussing the 2024 CPAC straw poll results and having conversations between Donald Trump and Governor Ron DeSantis when it comes to their futures on the ticket, if that happens in 2024. Politics in Pinellas County. I know it's Pinellas County. We really don't talk about it that much. However, evidently there's an election coming up in Pinellas County and in St. Pete, the city, which also I didn't know had a mayor. So we will have that further discussions. And at the end, will the race stay in Tampa Bay? Question that everyone keeps on asking. And I feel that we'll continue to keep on asking that for the next 10 years. But with that, to my left on today's table is VP of Advocacy, Matthew Lettelleir, retired Colonel E.J. Otero, and local business and entrepreneur, Joe Wicker. Thanks, guys, for all coming on board.
Glad to be here. Absolutely, glad to be here.
So I want to jump into today's conversations very quickly, and that is the quickly developing and rapidly disintegration of two very big countries inside the Caribbean, which are Cuba and Haiti. Last week was the devastating news on Tuesday, I believe, of last week, of the assassination of the president of Haiti, President Moïse, I believe is his full name. At the moment, there's a complete breakdown of who is or who is not the president. I spent the day actually reading the English version of the Constitution of 1982 and then the attempt reading of the Creole version of their Constitution, which are two completely different things. So we will have a deep dive down with that. But first, with the wave of protesting in Cuba, which I have not seen since, I would say, the early 90s, maybe, to the effect. We definitely wanted to, and are very thankful to be able to get retired Colonel E.J. Otero to discuss what is happening in Cuba. Colonel, what are your thoughts of this update that has occurred in the last 72 hours?
Well, there is no science to revolutions, counter-revolutions, or protests. And if you look at the makeup of this kind of protests that have been happening, that happened years ago in Venezuela, where you had millions of people throwing themselves on the streets, and the government suppressed them anyway. In Cuba, they have done that. In Cuba, they did it in the 80s with what became the periodo especial, the special period in which they diverted the attention of the people that were protesting at the time by saying that the United States was at fault, that we were about to invade Cuba. Never happened, but it's a different generation. So we're not talking about a generation of Cubans that saw the firing squads of the 60s or that saw the periodo especial, even those. You're talking about a generation that are driven by different factors. They want freedom, but they also want access. They want access to the rest of the world. That they don't have. Could it be material? Could it be ideological? It hasn't really been defined, but what we do know is that the tens of thousands of people that have thrown themselves on the street have met response by the government. The military has reacted in some areas, and I caution people getting excited about this. The military folks have actually joined the protesters, but that is not uncommon in this sort of scenarios. It doesn't really reflect much. What we do know is that some of the leadership, the impromptu leadership in the different towns, they want to call for a peaceful protest. Peaceful protest. I mean, I'm half Cuban, I have family in Cuba. Peaceful protest, it's a misnomer. And you have to be cautious. You have to be very cautious about that. In Venezuela, they wanted peaceful protests for a very long time, thinking that the elections were going to make the change and that we're going to bring down the regime. It never happened.
Correct.
So I would just simply err on the side of caution on this one, hoping that the government would disappear, hoping that the government will go away. But let's remember, this is the same government, and the leadership is still the same leadership that in the 60s did not hesitate to kill people or shoot at people. So let's see how this develops.
I think a lot of people misunderstand the concept of what, one, a Latin American revolution looks like, and two, what we have seen so many times, cycle after cycle, in regards to the Latin American countries, especially Cuba, where a lot of politics in hand are focused more in Florida, because it's a very big hot button issue in Florida. Also, you can talk about the trade embargoes and how a lot of Republican states that are formally wanting to trade with Cuba. Cuba, I think it's what, 70% of their agriculture has to be imported into the country because they don't have the resources. So I think it's something that needs to be discussed. I also am very hesitant to focus on this cycle until I see something a little bit different. I pray every day for the freedom of Cuba and for the people to be able to live a life in democracy. I feel that without the wave, a higher wave and higher participation of the military, I don't see that really occurring. Joe Wicker,
I was just going to ask him, EJ, when you say the military's join, it's not uncommon for the military to join in on protests. Are they basically there to monitor the situation? Are they really joining, or are they monitoring and acting as agents of the state?
Okay, if you're looking at it from a press and observation from the world, they're joining the protest.
Right.
If you're looking at it from an intelligence perspective, you have to assume that some of the military people joining the protests are part of the state security to see who's doing what.
To find out who the leaders are.
Absolutely.
So that they can be
absolutely.
Killed. Yeah.
They actually uncovered in Pinar del Rio, I believe, they uncovered a couple of folks that called themselves part of the protest that were military, and they actually turned out that they were looking for information, and they were corralled in a corner. They let them go. They didn't do anything physical to them, but yeah, you're right.
Where they were, I remember reading a report today talking about how I think shots have now been fired in the city of Santiago, and that people have started to lose their lives over the protests. Do you think that the government will do a larger crackdown if this continues to escalate?
Absolutely. It is a Leninist regime. Castro called himself a pro-democracy in 1958 and 1959. He went on TV saying, when he took over the government, he says, "I'm a Marxist-Leninist." And part of the structure of being a Leninist is the free use of violence to maintain the government in place. And they have done that. They did it in the 60s, they did it in the 70s, they did away with that at the end of the 70s. Then it was just selective repression, getting people and taking them away. I mean, to the point that today you have 95% of the people in Cuba have been in jail at one point or another. Correct. Of the male population. That's a fact. So the fact that shots were fired, I doubt it is the people, because the people don't have any weapons. So it was the government, and if the government did, that means that they shows that they have a willingness to use it to suppress this protest. And how committed is Díaz-Canel, the president of Cuba, to continue the Castro and the Marxist-Leninist legacy? He's very willing. He said on TV just a couple of days ago, he invited people. You would never hear a president of the United States or a Western country say what he said, which is, these people that are going, Cuban people, if you're a communist, member of the party, if you're a communist and you're a revolutionary, you're supposed to go and take them out on the street. So he's telling people, go and fight against each other. So he's not holding back. And the fact that the military forces were displayed to support the national police along with the state security police, it shows a desire and a willingness to use weapons at all costs.
When it comes to a U.S. response, I found it very comical, the president's response in regards to saying that the reason why they're protesting is just simply for them not having the vaccine, or for a simple wanting more economic freedom. And I laughed a little about that, because that's not at all what they're probably protesting. This is just a bubbling up of the stress and of being occupied for so long as a people.
Well, if COVID, if medications, it's part of the reason. There's no question about that. But it's also the lack of food. It is a lack of care, it's a lack of hygiene, it is a lack of available resources, of daily resources, electricity, milk, all these kinds of things that people need for their families and so on. It has been building up for a very long time. But what catches my attention is this desire of the president to use mirrors in the message of Cuba. Because folks are starting to say, well, the embargo, because if it wasn't for the U.S. embargo, none of this would be happening. They would have medications and they would have this and they would have that, without understanding that even the embargo, which is an act that was signed in 1963 by President Kennedy, that embargo does not prohibit medication.
Correct.
Medications is free and open for Cuba. The United States have been sending medications for free, tons and tons, for a very long time. But the Cuban government does not use it for its people because it is currency. And we were talking about that earlier, before the show, that it is their one currency to maintain and prop up their efforts in Latin America. So they don't have the dollars, they can send doctors to Venezuela, but they can also send the medications that they don't provide their own people. Their people are controlled, their people are within an island. In Venezuela, they gain the favor of the Venezuelan regime and the Venezuelan people by saying, well, Cuba is sending us the vaccines, Cuba is sending us penicillin, Cuba is sending all this, when in reality, Cuba is not even giving it to its own people. So it is currency.
I think something that people forget a lot when it comes to the geopolitics of South and Central America is that Cuba still tries to be a broker of trying to push communism, trying to push socialism to a lot of countries south of in South America by sending doctors, by sending medicine, by sending food, which they're not feeding their own people to. It's so funny, even to, and I'll venture into this. There's a reason why I don't visit, and my family doesn't visit Cuba, and many other Hispanic Americans don't visit Cuba, is the sole purpose of they know what the government is doing with the dollars that you're bringing into that country. If you're vacationing or you're doing it for missionary work, the dollar still gets to the government. No matter how much you try for it not to happen, it still goes to that. You go 3 blocks away from one of the main restaurants in Havana and it's absolute poverty because tourists don't go there, so they don't clean it up, they don't make it nice. And I think a lot of Americans are just the veneer of something that's been locked in the 1960s, 1950s is very appealing for them to go visit. And at the end of the day, when you have friends and families and you hear the stories of people that die to get to this country, I don't know how anyone could even think about visiting Cuba as a tourist now and not it's like visiting Germany in 1930.
It really bothers me when I see Americans that go to countries like Cuba, or I'm thinking of some other places too, but mainly Cuba most recently, and they'll say things like, oh, it was so beautiful, it was so nice, the people were so amazing, oh no, it was this, the food and that. And I'm like, do you think for 1 second that you go as a tourist to a communist country that knows exactly who you are, that knows where you came from, that knows where you're staying, that knows where you're going, and controls every aspect of your experience? Do you really believe that you are seeing communist Cuba? No, you are not. They are not going to let you see it. And it's such to the extreme in Cuba that when Americans think that they're contributing and they're helping the Cuban people, you're not, because the government sets up things like entire different currencies. And they control your currency, so that way when you come in, you have to exchange it, and they have their own currency just for the tourists, and then the government confiscates that from the people so that they keep it separate. So you can't even benefit a common Cuban citizen with your tourism, because the government's there to make sure that they extract from you, especially the American citizens, every penny they can get out of you. So that's all it is, an extraction of wealth from the United States. And then these people come home and say, oh, it was so amazing. No, you just supported the communist regime, really. Correct. Is what you did.
The amount of work that we have to do as a church when we go there to support, and we go there to support the ministries, we go there to support churches, Anglican churches and Catholic churches just alike, because they are just as persecuted as any other organization there in Cuba. The amount of steps we have to do to ensure that Bibles are being sent properly, are not being confiscated, funds are being sent properly, that going through multiple channels so that they actually reach the people. A tourist doesn't know that. They have no idea.
No, I mean, they'll come home and say things like, oh, the mountains and the what. Hey, you know what? The sunset in the deserts of western Iraq was kind of nice at nighttime too, and it got kind of cool. That didn't make Saddam a nice guy, okay? I mean, the sunset looks nice in a lot of countries.
Well,
Cuba's communist, it's terrible, and you shouldn't be visiting. Hold on one second.
Yeah,
I wanted to read this tweet because you mentioned the White House. Julie Chung, who is an assistant secretary in the Biden administration, this is her tweet. Peaceful protests are growing in Cuba as the Cuban people exercise their right to peaceful assembly. They like to throw out peaceful because they don't want it to be anything other than, right? Because to get your freedom, I'm sorry, a lot of times peaceful doesn't do it. But peaceful assembly to express concerns about rising COVID cases and deaths and medicine shortages. Oh yes, that's what after 50 years the Cuban people are concerned about now is COVID cases. Are you kidding me? She goes on to say, we commend the numerous efforts of the Cuban people mobilizing donations to help their neighbors in need. Oh yeah, the Cubans are just mobilizing, their own Make-A-Wish Foundation, to send kids to Disney World. No, they're starving. They're starving, and they've been starving, and they've been oppressed for over 50 years, and we're acting like they're worried about COVID. That's offensive, and it shows a complete disconnect by the Biden administration. And the worst part of it is that it shows you that they're not willing to just stand up and be confrontational to and honest about communism and the evil that it is.
I don't expect anything from this administration when Biden's nap times are like 40% of the day. It's
right, well, he's in bed,
ridiculous.
yeah, sure. He's in bed by 12 p.m. I mean, p.m., but anyway.
But I'll tell you, I will say this about Cuba. Anybody that supports Cuba in any way, shape, or form, or excuses, or puts a veneer on what is happening in Cuba, I will tell you is a moron. And there is a reason for that. If you fail to understand what you're talking about, if you fail to read about what you're talking about, especially when it comes to a country which there's all kinds of sources of information and history available, and you still decide to write the nonsense that this lady wrote, and people here in Tampa do, Lord knows I have debated them many times, and they always present that. They always present, well, Cuba's wonderful. The reality is this with Cuba. Anybody that decides that they're going to go ahead, they're going to go to Cuba, and they're going to change the Cuban makeup by having businesses in Cuba and by reaching out, they're going to learn the lesson that Hyatt learned about 30 years ago. It was a business decision by Hyatt Europe to make the decision, but Hyatt said, we're going to be opening up a resort in Cuba. And they opened the resort. Part of the business plan is how much are you going to pay the employees, the Cuban employees? Hyatt said we're going to be paying them $15 an hour. That was a call about 10, 15 years ago when this happened, which is a lot of money.
That's and a lot of money.
Like, wow, let's go ahead and do that. And then the what is called the Paloma, the organization that is made of Paloma, which is the people that run the hotel industry in Cuba, is made up by the Cuban military. And the Cuban military laid down and they met with Hyatt and they told them, fantastic, that is great money for the Cuban people. We're going to take that money and we'll pay them in return.
Correct.
And they pay them $10 a month.
Yeah.
So the rest of the money was kept by the military, was kept by the government.
Yeah.
When people don't understand that, if you have this pie in the sky idea, that if you're going to go to Cuba and you open up all this business so people can free themselves, it's not such thing. It is a totalitarian Stalinist regime. It is based on Leninistic structures that everything that you do is through the government. There is no freedom to go independently.
Well, look, China didn't become less communist just because they became more wealthy.
No, now they're getting rid of the billionaires because they've made too much money.
China is just as communist.
I will say this, and I think I can imagine what the response will be for the colonel, that if people continue to talk about opening an embassy or some kind of office of Cuba in Florida or Tampa Bay area, I will definitely see a revolt on the streets in front of that facility, because I couldn't even imagine how, and you see politicians trying to kowtow to the regime and kowtow to those people because they might agree with their socialist positions, as some Democrats do. And you really do understand the reality of some people and they're willing to, as long as they can cash a paycheck, they're more than willing to open up a consulate for a dictatorship. And I think it's very disgusting sometimes. So,
I'm going to say, I mean, Joe Wicker is a veteran that I respect deeply, more than I can even express. I respect him. He's a combat guy and all that. And I have seen combat myself, not like him, but I have, and I respect it. This is one thing that we have here in Tampa. It's called Central Command.
Yes.
And they have a Special Operations Command, and we have MacDill Air Force Base, in which you have 30 to 40 generals at any given time leading operations around the world at any given time. And we're going to put a Cuban consulate. There is an actual movement in Tampa to put a Cuban consulate, which has been identified by the FBI and identified by every single intelligence agency in the world as a nest of espionage. We suffered through that through the WASP network back in the 90s, and MacDill was one of the targets. And there's people locally here, let's put a consulate 2 miles away from MacDill Air Force Base. It is insanity for me.
I'm okay with putting it in St. Pete. What do you think, Lettelleir?
They want to. They offered it.
Mayor Kreisman hasn't said that he'd like to see the consulate be in St.
Yeah,
Pete.
St. Pete might take it, right?
I think St. Pete would take it.
It would be like the CIA asking Russia if they could just set up shop, in the courtyard there, I don't know, what do you call it, the Kremlin or
Red Square.
Yeah, Red Square. Can we just set up a little coffee shop? We just want to run a coffee shop in Red Square. It's no big deal,
To think that we're not running a coffee shop already.
We probably are running a coffee shop in Red Square. But we wouldn't announce it.
I don't have any details. I don't know any information.
And it wouldn't be welcomed by the government. We would be foolish to allow a Cuban-run facility like EJ said, right outside of MacDill. Man, that's just crazy.
It is crazy. Surprisingly enough, it is not a partisan thing. There's people from both sides of the aisle that support it here in Tampa. And
because
the level of ignorance, they really believe that they're going to make money.
Yes, it's the belief that they're going to make money and that somehow that money is going to make its way back to the poor Cuban people, and it's not.
It never will, it never
not.
will. With the current regime, it never will. And I have already said multiple times that I will never step foot on Cuba until this current regime has been overthrown.
Hey, I just one other example of a real world example of how these types of benevolent things don't end up panning out the way we think it does because we're naive in that. Oil for food. Remember oil for food for Iraq? Let me tell you what Saddam did with the oil for food money. I believe it was specifically the Al Fal Palace down in southeastern Iraq that he built as like a memorial, okay? And it's nice, and no, I'm sorry, it's in Baghdad, but it's a memorial to a battle or something that happened down towards Kuwait. But anyway, it's a nice palace. I've been in it. There's a plaque on there. When you walk in, there's a plaque, and it shows the date at which it was built. And it's like, guys, he's building palaces at the same time that he's saying the people are starving, and so we're willing to allow a trade of oil for food for the people. The guy's building palaces. That's what dictators do. That's what communists do.
Well, we will continue to monitor and pray for the Cuban people as they continue to hopefully take. I don't see it ever changing until there is some form of military clash, and that it's horrible that a civil war has to kind of take place for that to happen, for there to be legitimate change within the Cuban population. There were speculations that one of the Raul Castro had fled the country, which I thought was ridiculous.
Oh yeah, that meme. Yeah, I meant to mention that. Yeah,
but that's just fueling a disinformation. I think something that people need to understand is just we need to wait and see how we can support the Cuban people and what's happening right now. To switch a little bit, I think a little bit more east of Cuba is the country of Haiti, which has also started to have its downward spiral in regards to its political climate. Tuesday of last week, there was the assassination of its current president, who wasn't really their president because he had been ruling from fiat for at least 7 months after his reign had already ended. the Senate in Haiti had been dissolved with only, out of the 23 members, only 10 were officially still senators. The entire lower house has been dissolved, and 3 of the 7 Supreme Court judges were also removed from their positions a few months before the assassination. Only a week prior to the assassination, a new prime minister was established. So the complete disarray of another country in the Caribbean, what is that speaking to? I want to say the foreign policy of the president, and now what are we going to do now? I don't think I was alive last time. None of us were alive the last time a president in Haiti was assassinated. But you guys were probably alive during the last time U.S. troops were in Haiti. What do you think can happen now?
It's bigger than this. It is a matter of removing ourselves from the whole geopolitical situation in Latin America and take a bigger look of what's going on. You have the situation in Haiti, which is very, I don't want to sound callous, but it's a lot easier to knock out the president of Haiti if you're an opponent, if you're in the opposition. Why would you go and get 26 Colombian soldiers, special forces to come in and conduct the affair, and 2 Americans that were involved in the whole thing? Who else is behind that whole operation? Not long ago, just a month and a half ago, there was an attempt against the president of Colombia. They took shots at his helicopter, and we still don't know who he was. It was supposedly in an area that was infested by guerrillas, by the ELN, and there were troops, Colombian Special Forces troops, that also engaged just 2 weeks ago and took out the leader of the FARC, Santrich, who was on the run for about a year and a half. These are very significant events.
You said a couple of Americans are wrapped up in the Haitian
2 Americans.
Yes, 2 Americans.
2 Haitian Americans were detained of the 28 that were captured.
Military vets as well.
Whoa, hold on a second. Let me make sure I understand. So these are Haitian-born American citizens that were back in Haiti, and you said they were veterans?
I don't know if they were Haitian-born. I know they were Americans.
They were carrying blue passports.
Yeah.
Okay. But you said they were Haitian-American.
Correct.
So they're, okay. And you said they were veterans?
Yes.
Oh, okay. So you're saying
No, do not put those. Do not connect the dots.
I mean, so you're saying it's
What?
you're saying we mess around in Haiti then?
No, I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that these have been identified as mercenaries by the United States, by the government of Colombia, who is also participating in the investigation, by independent agencies in Latin America. These are mercenaries. So are the mercenaries that are supporting Petro in Colombia.
Well, you know our government already knows who these people are. I mean, we already know who they are, right? They've already went through their Facebook. They've already went through all their messages. Yeah. So our government probably knows everything about those 2 Americans already.
The relationships is what concerns me. That's what concerns me. Because all these things are happening in a very grand scale, and nobody in the United States gives a crap.
I don't think a lot of Americans give a crap about what's happening around the world at all right now. I think the Americans have been.
They know about China.
They know.
Well,
they know about Russia because they have it fed to them on a daily basis.
They are aware of China. They're aware of Russia.
Years,
but at the end of the day, nothing is really happening.
Well, every 10
it's just
years,
a constant
Haiti gets
propaganda.
hit.
Right.
Every 10 years, Haiti gets hit with a hurricane. We send them $1 billion. The money gets lost. The Clintons get richer, and then we move on.
Whoa.
I mean,
we have no information when it comes to the Clinton Foundation, nor do we have any information in regards to anything about the Clinton family. That is of his own personal response.
I'm not saying
no one here has any connection to the Clintons. We can
make
this clear.
You worried about tripping outside? You worried about having a trip and fall incident?
I love my wife. I love my life.
Trip and fall incident.
And I'm not taking.
You're not suicidal,
I'm not taking my life anytime soon.
And just for the record, you're not suicidal.
I am not. So, backtracking a little bit, Matt, what would be your thoughts of how the U.S., especially the Tampa Bay area, because we do trade a lot with Central and South America, and we do a lot of business with those parts of the world. I mean, Miami and even parts of South and Central Florida could be considered the financial and entertainment capital of Central and South America. What are some of the benefits that we could do to start at least trying to fix somewhat economically?
Yeah, I mean, look, it's tough because you do have these countries that are, Cuba's 90 miles away from Key West, where I was last week. Like, it's so close geographically, but so far from us politically.
Correct.
And in how they operate and everything. So, I mean, the Rays went and played, and I know we'll talk about the Rays later. The Rays went and played in Cuba, I think it was 2014, 2015. Chamber representatives went down on that trip and saw it. And I mean, I've talked to folks, I wasn't on that trip, but I've talked to folks that, did say that they saw the bad part. I mean, that walking around was not safe, that they were away from their that they weren't with their handlers 24/7 and things like that. And, they saw the communist, authoritarian side of Cuba. And yeah, it concerned them, but this is under the Obama administration that opened things up, and we're trying to normalize relations. And then obviously President Trump rolled that back in a significant way, and Senator Marco Rubio is in favor of keeping those rollbacks in place under a Biden administration. But what's going to give? Do we hope that time passes and the original regime dies, and hope that the next generations are less authoritarian, or do we just stand still and let them continue to operate how they're going to operate just without our money? And I don't think there's a right or wrong answer there. It's just, but everyone's going to have a different opinion on how to do it, and it's definitely different by party. As far as like the trade goes in Miami, there's 100 other countries in South and Central America that we trade with that aren't authoritarian, that their money is good, our money's good there, and it's prosperous for everybody. I mean, obviously a goal would be for that to happen to all the countries, but depending on who's in the White House, you gotta play by what rules they're wanting and they're looking for there. And for the next 3.5 years, it's going to be the Biden administration that's making those determinations on what U.S. foreign policy is.
And I think that's where the problem is. I think that's where the quirk of the problem is that no one really knows what the Biden administration's foreign policy manifesto is. No one understands what his thought process is. And again, like once Kimberly Davis said on the comment section, right now it's just about Biden and his ice cream. Like, that's literally what's happening. Like, I don't think anyone is really concerned about what's happening in Cuba or what's happening in Haiti.
There's a book called The World is Flat. And in that book, it espoused and delineated American foreign policy for the past 60 years have been east to west and west to east. It's never been seriously north to south, south to north. That's a fact. The relationship that we have with Canada is more like a brotherly relationship. We speak the same language, we kind of like look the same. We have kind of like similar histories, French were here, we're also there, that kind of thing. Yeah. And, that's it. But when
and
it
our
comes,
hockey team is better.
Our hockey team is so much better.
but there is a serious lack of realization that in Latin America there is an axis of world effect. Example: when other countries realize that Latin America is the key for a number of foreign policy initiatives by those given countries, and we fail to react in the past, mostly so in the past 30 years. Then you're missing. Then you're gonna be playing, from a position of coming from behind than leading the game. For some reason, somewhere along the line, we decided that our diplomacy, that it is our backyard, that Latin America is our backyard, was offensive. For some reason, we pulled away from that. And Monroe Doctrine is not going to be the driving factor anymore. So to give them more independence, so they're not offended, we're going to be pulling away. We had all these bad examples that we were involved in at the beginning of the 20th century, at the end of the 19th century, for some reason still permeate our relationship with Latin America, which to me it's nonsense. China figured out that if they buy the Atlantic side of the Panama Canal and the eastern side of the Panama Canal, the Pacific side of the Panama Canal, they control Panama.
Correct.
They control everything that is going in and out of Panama. The same thing in Colombia with the Buenaventura shipyards, and the same with Cartagena. And they're starting to make inroads in Ecuador. They started to make inroads in Peru. They're destabilizing governments for their own good. They're investing, they're putting all this money, and they're destabilizing Latin America. And by doing so, it destabilizes us because it puts us on our heels. How do we respond to that? We go, well, I don't know, Cuba, well, 62 years, but we don't really have a way to counteract that. In Cuba, after the Bay of Pigs effort, the United States policy was one of hands off. We're not going to do this anymore. That was a declared United States policy. We promise you, Castro, we're not going to try to depose you. That was in the 60s. For some reason, it still carries on today. There is no desire by anybody in the political spectrum of the United States to say we're going to be involved with Cuba and make sure that the opposition in Cuba is supported.
Well, wasn't that
and
primarily? Wasn't that mostly after also a result of the I don't want to say denuclearization, but they were going to have nuclear weapons in Cuba, but it was about keeping the ballistic missiles out of Cuba, right? Wasn't it? It was like, hey, we understand you're communist. We know Russia's your friend. Don't bring any of those missiles over here, and we'll leave you alone. What, right? Wasn't that kind of what it?
That is a generalization. It's simple and it's correct, but it's bigger than that.
Oh, I know I oversimplified the whole thing.
When Cuba decided that he was going to start the revolution in Cuba in 1952, there was a number of things that happened with the United States. He came to the United States. He promised the moon and the earth to the United States, and the United States were, engaging him. We were giving him money. The United States was the biggest supplier of money for Castro when he was in Sierra Maestra. In 1958, Castro says, no, just like Chavez did in 1998. No, I am pro-democracy. If I don't work out, I'm going to be gone in 5 years. But we didn't hold his feet to the fire. Then Playa Girón took place, Bay of Pigs took place. We were humiliated, not because our lack of military prowess, but because the guys that went into Bay of Pigs were betrayed.
Well, we weren't fully committed, so
we're not.
Yeah.
That applies. That applies to what's going on in Latin America today. It's a fear to get involved.
I think what is happening, and the comment section is going pretty well in regards to what's discussions. Hector Gonzalez is definitely on the right point when he makes the comment that Americans just don't care. Iraq and Afghanistan have exhausted the American people when it comes to foreign affairs. I agree with that outside of our hemisphere, but I think we need to focus more on our hemisphere. Hey Billy for watching, and some other people that are watching, Laura, Kim, thank you guys for watching everything else. Let us do, I think we could keep on going for hours in regards to this conversation, but I want to hear more of Matt Lettelleir's beautiful voice. So we will pivot quickly. Again, my name is Anibal David Cabrera, and this is the Yard Signs. Thank you for watching the most important, relevant podcast on the internet. Again, we have just finished talking about the collapsing countries of Cuba and Haiti at the moment. I read a whole report about Peru and what just happened there and what's happening in El Salvador, but I completely forgot about talking about those things, and we'll talk about it a different time, because again, I could talk foreign policy forever. Thank you for watching. We will continue having these conversations about international, but right now let's talk about what everyone wants to talk about, and that is the CPAC 2024 straw poll results. So, of a group of, I would say, a large room of Anglo-Saxons, the final results for their polls. De verdad? I'm probably not wrong. With a total of 70%, Donald Trump wins the straw poll for CPAC's 2024 presidential, but the person right behind him is Ron DeSantis at 21%. Other people on the list were Nikki Haley at 1%, Ted Cruz at 1%, Tucker Carlson at 1%. I guess we want more of Tucker Carlson.
Basically, everybody else is at 1% or 0%.
Correct. Everyone else.
You got to throw Rand Paul in there.
I see Rand Paul. I see John Kushner is on here. Larry Hogan. Matt. Our favorite rhino.
And the 1% that couldn't figure it out from all of these people are undecided. Who's your favorite rhino?
I love Mitt Romney. I think he is. represents his people.
John Kasich is
of
on here. Why
Utah.
are they even
It's
putting
so
his
good.
name on
I
here?
love it. Rick
Why are they even
Scott
putting his
is
name
on
on
the
it?
list at 0%.
Yeah, but Rick
So,
Scott is like a legitimate person. Like, why is John
Rick
Kasich?
Scott is a legitimate.
Well,
what
he's
doesn't make a legitimate person?
He's a senator with an opportunity to run, and he's got the money to run. Why is John Kasich on here? Who is Charlie Baker? Sorry if I'm supposed to know who that is.
Charlie Baker is a governor of.
Is he? Mike Pence. Mike Pence is at 0%, which shouldn't be surprising.
Poor Mike
I mean-
Pence. I was really hoping that he would.
Yeah.
That people would like him
He's
more.
actually an example of like how you can go from like hero to zero, right?
Scott Walker.
Overnight. Yeah, Scott Walker's another one.
Oh, Scott Walker was
Yeah.
a rise and then complete fallout. It was a horrible thing. So, seeing the results of this straw poll, what are your thoughts of the 2024 election? Because God forbid we not talk about 2022.
Well, there was one other poll that they did. Okay, they did. That was the poll with Trump. So without Trump, DeSantis is at 68%, which basically means that's it.
That's it.
He's at 68%. Mike Pompeo is at 5%. I actually like him. He's a smart guy. He's a smart guy.
He's smart
He's
guy.
got good values. He understands the government. I actually
He'll
like
be a
him.
great vice president. I don't think he'll ever become president.
Mike Pompeo's a smart dude. He's a good guy to have around.
I don't doubt that.
Donald Trump Jr. is at 4%, which is kind of odd. You would think that if DeSantis was at 61, you would think Donald Trump Jr. might get 10 or something.
A room
but
that big.
the list
probably
is so
the same
big.
percentage of people that have cocaine.
Well,
in
the
room.
list is so big. It spreads out. It spreads out. But anyway.
We're gonna let that ride.
So without Trump, DeSantis is the presumptive nominee.
But I mean, not to get like the politics of it, but it's a straw poll, of,
Right.
As David said, mostly Anglo-Saxons. I'll remind you that Herman Cain won the 2012 Florida presidency 5 straw poll.
Yes.
And I don't think that he was the nominee. Is
he still alive?
That year.
That is
No,
no,
he
he died. Remember?
of COVID.
COVID.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is the interesting point Matt brings up about straw polls is when you look back on straw polls,
It's never-
pretty funny, right?
You don't wanna win it.
Yeah. No, right. Yeah. No, it's a good point. You look back on some straw polls and some people that win them, you're like, really? They won? Like, how did they win? Like,
And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm concerned that our governor, our good and just and righteous governor, is starting to win these things 3 years out of him really making any comment whatsoever. He's focused on the governor's race of 22. He really can't talk at all about the fact that he's winning
But
all these
here's-
races for president.
but here's what this really is, though. First of all, it's CPAC. It's the Conservative Political Action Committee. Okay, so these are the most conservative people, activists going to Texas, getting
And
excited.
college kids on spring break.
And college kids on spring break.
So a lot of Anglo-Saxons.
And so, okay, it's all about Trump. I got it, right? But the assumption you can make is that DeSantis's popularity is really tied to Trump. So if for some reason Trump's not with DeSantis or DeSantis isn't with Trump, then DeSantis isn't at 68%.
I
See what I'm
really,
saying?
I
I mean,
really
you gotta-
want to see.
gotta keep in mind,
I
that's-
know, but I really
that's
want to
the
see
Trump
what
effect.
the number is of people that are more than willing to see a second Trump presidency, and those that want to see him run in 2024, and those are like, okay, we had him, that's great, let's move on.
I think there's actually, I don't think that Trump would win if he ran again right now, the way things are today. But I think there is actually a real opportunity for him to win, and here's what it would be. If inflation skyrockets, if for some reason the housing market began to decline, don't think it will, but if it did, if you had a major recession take effect, if the government stops printing money, and again, if you have these things that are occurring and you start having massive unemployment, the outlook of businesses and individuals is bleak. If you have problems like that occurring 6 months out, 12 months out from the election, then Biden's at real risk of losing, and somebody like Trump could win because he could come back. Trump could come back in and say, "Hey, listen, I'm sorry about all the mean tweets. I know you guys didn't like it.
Which will never happen.
I'm going to tone it down.
Which will never happen.
But we were winning, and the economy was booming. And if you give me a second shot, we'll do it again. And if you don't think that's possible, I would refer you to Bill Clinton, who was the governor of Arkansas, was defeated, and then basically came back and was like, my bad, sorry, I've learned some lessons, give me another shot, and got reelected as governor. And then, of course, because of that, went on to become president.
I feel very uncomfortable continually talking about the Clintons, but it is a very good point.
But he was a good politician. He was a master.
There's the big elephant in the room. Trump is going to be 80 or close to 80.
Yes.
So the idea is
an active 80. An energetic 80. A young 80.
80 is the new 70.
Joe, I
80 is
cannot
the
deal
new
with
50.
you right now.
80 is the new 50.
No, it's not. 80 is 80. Like, eventually that stops working.
Well,
I'm telling you, I've seen some people look 80. I wish I looked like 80.
When Trump was campaigning at 73 or 72, I was sitting there thinking to myself, I don't see how he does it. 4 hours of sleep a night, 5 events, like he's wearing me out, and I'm just watching him on TV.
No, but
the guy.
But the question is this: is it Trump, or is it his agenda?
I think it's 30%, and Matt, chime in when you want to. It's 30%, I would say the base, about 20, 25%, maybe 30% is going to always be for Trump. We'll always push for Trump no matter what happens. Rain or shine, it's going to happen.
I think it's bigger than that.
I don't think it's bigger than that. I think the majority of Republicans are like, look, we had Trump, we need to figure out a way to win the presidency again. And they don't think we'll be able to win the presidency with Trump. I think
Power over the person.
exactly.
He got 16 million more votes the second time around.
Yes, we also grew as
We
also grew as a nation by 22 million people.
After all of the mean tweets and all of the drama, he got 16 million more
Yes,
votes.
he grew it with Hispanics, with whites, with even with
So,
the gay community.
obviously,
However,
there was an appetite.
He did not grow with the white Anglo-Saxon community.
Right, but I'm saying there was an appetite for more of that. And so, you know how it is with politics. In the moment, it's easy to hate a politician in the moment. When you're looking in the rearview mirror and that person's not there anymore, and you think back to what it was like, it's like, maybe they weren't such a bad guy.
I think history will deem it to where the Trump administration was more fluff, and really it was the policies that did the most work when it came to the Trump administration, because he put really smart people in the positions that he needed to, and he really didn't care what was happening. I think what needs to happen now is you're going to have 4 years of Biden. I don't think Biden's going to run for a second term. I highly doubt that.
No.
Kamala, they are basically smothering her at the VP when it came to the southern border and anything, and now she's taking over vaccine. I have no idea what she does. What does Kamala Harris do?
Because Kamala's trying to put Biden in a nursing home. Like she's trying to get him there.
Well, she's messing it up every single day, and
But I just want to say, I think you're minimizing the amount of winning that you were doing. I would just remind you, Trump said your head would be spinning. There'd be so much winning that our heads were spinning. Your head was spinning. It had to be, because it was record unemployment. It was record unemployment across every sector of society, whether it was whites, blacks, Hispanic, men, women, everything. It was record, like the lowest unemployment in different demographics dating back to the 50s.
I think any Republican in that situation might have done the same thing.
Gas was $1.79.
However, I will say this: I think that another Trump administration, I don't think he gets out of the primaries. Honestly, I don't think he'll get out of the primaries.
Trump wouldn't get out of the primary?
No,
there is no primary.
There is a primary.
If Trump runs, there's no primary.
Why run again? Why? Why run
Well, no,
again?
that's a different question. If Trump runs, let me just tell you, if Trump runs, everybody else, every other Republican that's running in that primary is doing so to raise their name ID so that they can run for Congress in their home state, or governor, or for a Senate seat. They're not running to be president.
And we'll lose.
They're running to lose.
And we'll lose.
And maybe write a book. Maybe write a book or something. That's what they're running for. If Trump runs, the primary's done.
I think there's a lot of fever and a lot of passion for someone else to run, and I think that's going to be the governor of Florida.
And Trump can also run for Congress, and then
He's not going to do that. He's not going to do that.
He's not going to
No.
run for that.
He's not
a leader. He's not a.
No,
Yeah.
he's an executive.
He's
He's,
going to
a
be
sole
one of
proprietor.
425.
He's not going to be one
But
of
that means that he
435.
doesn't have to go win in states that are contested. All he has to get
No,
is
he-
280,000.
You're
people
confused.
vote for him. Wait.
Yeah.
But he is the kingmaker of the president, so he would
Yeah.
be the shadow president as speaker.
He would be shadow president
keep
now
it- but
if
keep in mind-
Ron DeSantis got put in. He would be shadow president.
There's a
still.
lot of people that would do that, Matt, because they need a job and they need some money. They want to be influential. Trump doesn't need any of that. He doesn't need to be a congressman. In fact, Trump would have to then show up to work. like he wouldn't even, he would have to show up to work and sit there and listen to a bunch of idiots talking about things they don't know what they're talking about. Did you see Trump on a committee? What committee are you going to put Trump on? Did you see Trump on a committee?
He would be instant speaker. But yeah, I agree.
I mean, what
was it?
No, he wouldn't.
Budget?
No, the Republican. No, you think the Republican establishment would nominate him speaker? No way in hell. No way.
I don't think he would be able to get
the people would want him to be speaker.
He would get into Congress
There's
in
no
a
way.
heartbeat, but I don't think I agree. I think
He would not
see
be
it'd be
speaker,
very difficult for him
and
to
he
do
would
it.
lose the race for
I'm
speaker.
not talking about in Palm Beach. He'd go run for
and Trump would
he took
run.
any seat he wanted.
Trump would run for speaker, and he would lose. His colleagues wouldn't
Again,
vote for him.
I feel that we need. I feel we need new blood. I feel that it was a great 4 years. I feel he would have won the presidency if he wasn't as bombastic when it came to his
I'm just
tweets.
thinking of this. I'm just thinking of President Trump as a freshman congressman. You go to visit his office, and he's already got it like gold plated. It's all blinged out.
He's
he's
blown the walls of the other congressional houses.
They
next
have
him.
to set up. They have to. Nobody wants to be in his office or on his hallway because you can't get through the traffic and the visitation.
God.
Yeah,
I mean, it's crazy.
I
It would be
remember when
crazy.
Marco Rubio got elected the first time. One of his staffers, he contacted me. He wanted me to write a paper on an issue, the Leahy Act. Remember the Leahy Act? Yeah. So I went to write a paper on that, and I delivered it. And I went in person. Marco Rubio, the man that today is so respected and is one of the most stalwart senators.
office, yeah.
At the time, he was in the basement.
Yes.
with gypsum board by walls. And you could hear people talking outside. Can you imagine Trump, him giving an office like that because he's a
And they
freshman?
would put him in the basement. He'd be in the basement.
He would take over the
Well,
basement.
here's the thing. He just
Everybody out.
But that's just it. He wouldn't even work from Washington.
Oh, my
He
God.
would be like, I'm not working. I'm working remote. Y'all went remote. You started doing that BS with Nancy Pelosi. I'm working remote from my penthouse at Trump Tower, and he just wouldn't even be there.
I'll make a prediction regarding the straw poll.
Yes.
None of the people on there are going to be the next mayor of St. Pete.
I can agree with that as well.
Who's going to be the next mayor? of
None
St.
of the people in the straw
Exactly.
poll.
Oh, will be the next mayor of St. Pete. Oh, I thought you were saying somebody was going to
No,
be.
no,
I was
none of them will be.
And that is a great transition to the next
You don't
topic.
think Ben Carson would make it as? You don't think he would win an election as St. Pete mayor?
I don't think he's black enough actually to win the mayor of St. Pete.
He's a little too conservative.
He's very conservative. Okay, thank you again. My name is Anibal David Cabrera, and you are watching the most important, irrelevant podcast on the internet, The Yard Signs. Again, thank you so much for turning in, watching. Again, our guest for today is Joe Wicker, retired Colonel E.J. Otero, and VP of Advocacy of the Chamber of Commerce for St. Pete, or
St. Pete Chamber.
St. Pete Chamber, Matt Lettelleir. Again, thank you guys so much for coming on board. We are now transitioning into more local politics or local conversations. And something that a lot of people don't know is that there's a mayoral race in St. Pete.
Had no idea.
I had no idea. I didn't know that St.
No
Pete
idea.
had a mayor. But again, whatever happens over the bridge happens over the bridge. We made sure, importantly, to bring up these topics because we have someone here that can talk about St. Pete politics. And with that, I will turn the cameras to you, Matt Lettelleir.
Well, thank you, David. I will say that you might make fun of St. Pete and Pinellas County, but I live where you vacation. So just let you have crossed the bridge. Go enjoy yourself.
I gotta stop posting those things.
But yeah, so there is a mayoral race going on in St. Pete this year. Rick Kreisman, who has been in office since 2013, is termed. Was elected in 2013, started in 2014. Is termed out. He'll end his term in January. There are a couple city council members, Darden Rice and Rob Blackman, who are running for mayor in the August 24th primary. Also, former County Commissioner Ken Welch, restaurateur Pete Boland, local businesswoman Marcelle Power, college student Michael Ingram, Tori. Oh man, I just looked this up. I am so sorry, Tori. Who got in the race last minute, like literally the last day, is also running. But it's interesting. You've got an open seat. You've got two what were deemed frontrunners, Democrats in a city that in the state limits Joe Biden won 61% of. And then you also have, they were kind of leading the way, leading in money. And then Rob Blackman jumps in the race as a Republican. He now has more cash on hand than Ken Welch as of the newest report. And then you also have Pete Boland, who's running as a restaurateur and as a anti-Trumper, anti-DeSantis, now DeSantis lover, because of the keeping restaurants open or allowing them to reopen much sooner than most other states. Also, Wengay Newton, former state representative Wengay Newton, is in the race. That's the last one. So you've got some racial divides going on there. You also have Democrat, Republican, progressives. It's going to be really interesting to see who makes it out of the primary open election in August. If no one gets 51%, the top two go on to a November runoff. In the city council is interesting. Normally you only have 4 seats up for election. 2 people are running for re-election, Gina Driscoll and Brandy Gabbard are running for re-election. Then you also have the 2 open seats. Amy Foster's termed out and Darden Rice is termed out, as well as running for mayor. But because Robert Blackman is leaving his council seat to run for mayor, there's a special election for that seat. So you have 6 races on the ballot in August and November. And it's getting serious. Always after 4th of July, things start to pick up for that August primary. I'm sorry?
Sorry.
It always happens.
I'm reading Hector's comment.
I have a question, Matt.
Yeah.
How much money, roughly? I know it's going to vary from somebody raising $500 to somebody raising $1 million or millions. Any idea like what it takes to launch a successful primary?
Yeah, I mean,
is it $1 million?
No, it's not $1 million. It's not like the Tampa race. I mean, it is
$500,000.
It's about 280,000 voters versus I think it's like 560 in Tampa right now. So
280,000 voters.
280,000 residents.
280,000 residents. So
It's
150,000. Like.
Oh my gosh! Rick Kreisman and Rick Baker was I think 40,000 votes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
So
you're
40,000 votes.
Yeah, we're not talking, I think it's less than 100,000 votes.
No, it was 40,000 total. It was like
Yeah, he's saying 40,000 votes.
Oh my
gosh.
If memory serves. No, it
Still,
doesn't take much.
if it's 50,000 votes, I mean, so that's like a state house. So it's like a state house race.
Yeah.
So
we're
I
close
mean,
to it.
Any Republicans?
There's two registered Republicans in the race: Pete Boland, restaurateur, and then Robert Blackman, the current city council member. Some people say that Wengay Newton.
So
is
you can run a race on it. I mean,
Republican,
okay.
You have to look at it from a standpoint of if there was only one Republican in the race, ostensibly they would get that 40% of the electorate that voted for Trump.
Right.
And then you got 2 Democrats fighting over the other 60%. So
Right,
really, the
right.
Republican would come out on top.
Right.
Which actually did happen in 2013. Bill Foster was the Republican running for re-election. He finished first, and then it was Rick Kreisman and Kathleen Ford battling for second. Rick Kreisman won,
Right.
And then Rick Kreisman was able to galvanize all the Democratic vote that was just over 50%. Rick Baker, if you remember, he fell short 4 years ago. Actually, Rick.
But he had a shot. He had a shot, though, didn't he?
Well, I mean, yeah, he lost 48.5 to 51.5 in the runoff, and they were both just under 50% in the primary.
Yeah, there's a history of Republicans winning St. Pete as the mayor, so it's not like it has not.
I mean,
happened
is
before.
St. Pete doing well, or are they having hard times that would cause the population to want to support a Republican?
I don't think the word hard time is justified. I think there's a little bit of a homeless population, but then there's also a huge economic boom that's occurring on the peninsula at the moment. I think the chamber is doing a great job of fostering businesses and fostering local economies to grow and everything else. I'm loving what's happening in downtown. I think it's great. I think what also needs to be had as an opportunity is that this is an open seat. Yeah. When open seats, you never know what can possibly happen. It's who shows up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think St. Pete's doing great. I mean, that's my job to say how great St. Pete's doing, but unemployment is super low. Building permits are just through the roof. You can't find a house because everyone's either holding it or as soon as it goes on the market, it is off the market in 2 days.
Right.
10,000, 20,000, 30,000 over asking, bidding wars happening.
But that does create problems. I mean, I won't say we don't have any problems. Affordable housing is a problem. And it's not, affordable housing for folks that are, below 80% of area median income. It's teachers, it's first responders, it's hospitality workers that can't find housing. And when you don't have hospitality workers that can find housing, now your number one industry doesn't have workers, and you're having entire sections of restaurants that are normally open closed off because they don't have the staff to serve it.
Well, it's becoming super expensive to live in and around the city, right? I mean, that's
as far as housing costs, yes. Other costs, cheaper than Tampa. Drinks.
I mean, the
appetizers.
land is. I mean, but the land is developed, right? I mean, like Pinellas is like fully developed, right?
No,
Like,
there's a lot
We
of
got, we got 86
I mean-
acres that are like prime for redevelopment right now.
well, okay, but redevelopment, right?
Which
like
we
you
will-
have to.
which we will talk
don't
about
You,
in
don't
the
you have to
next
tear?
segment.
Don't you have to tear something down?
Just
to
one big
rebuild,
building that's
right?
like a
Yeah.
warehouse.
Okay. Yeah.
We're talking about the Ray Stadium next.
Oh. Are you here to sell? Are you here to sell?
I will say this.
Do you need to
I
drop? Do you
think-
need to drop a? Do you need to?
I think it's healthy that there's Republican candidates and Democrat candidates.
I'm glad there's
Because
all-
in Tampa, to get a Republican person to run for
Whoa,
mayor,
you get a
that's
Republican
that's an
that
act of
turns
Congress.
that files as a Democrat, and then the Democrats vote for them every single time. I think it's the funniest thing ever.
2011, you had a Republican that won the primary election in
Tampa.
beginning of March and lost the runoff 3 weeks later.
Yep.
Rose for leader.
It feels like that was a long time ago.
Oh, that was
like,
dirty
It does, that's
like,
right.
10 years ago.
You know what I mean?
Forever.
Yeah, like
10 years ago, yeah.
politics has changed a
We
lot.
were young. We were very young. Okay, going back to the.
I was
the main-
already old 11 years ago.
Were you already halfway through your retirement at that time?
He was about to run for
Pretty
Congress.
much. I was picking flowers in the yard already in my bathrobe.
Oh my gosh. Depending on where do you think the big challenges are for St. Pete as a city in regards to this new change in leadership when it comes to the mayor and when it comes to the city council members? So again, that's a huge dynamic that will be changing if they're able to flip a lot of seats. It's a big opportunity.
Well, I mean, flipping seats or not, I think that right now you have a city council, again, 2 of them are running for re-election, 2 of them are running for mayor, that are at odds with the current administration for whatever reason. And some things are getting stymied because you need 5 votes. If 4 votes are going against your way, you're not getting anything done. You can't get through the simplest proposal. So, I mean, I think that's going to change. I think that whoever the next administration, they're going to be able to come in with, a honeymoon period of being able to get movement on some things. And I think that first thing will be the raise, and we'll talk about that a little bit. But there are still good things happening. There's a community benefit agreement that's going through that the chamber worked hard on with other community groups, and it came down to a good balance that if the city's going to give land or give concessions that are of monetary value to a developer, that part of those concessions should come back to the community in some way. So whether that's, hey, if you want to go build something here, and this is mostly refers to the Trop site, but if you want to go build something here, we're going to let you go build it and we're going to give it to you at a real good deal. But some of that's got to be affordable housing, or some of that's got to be green space, or some of that's got to be payment into an affordable housing fund, because you're getting a really good deal on this. You're going to make a lot of money, and your costs are lower, and that's what we're enticing you with. But it really has to be a balance when the city is doing that, because you don't want to stymie development of city land that private sector can develop better than the city can. So, I mean, I think that they've come to a pretty good agreement that they'll vote on later this week, and I think it'll pass. So I think it's one thing that the current administration was able to push through. Right now, a real it's kind of crazy that it's gotten to this point, but there's a marina in St. Pete that a private developer, actually a Donald Trump supporter, also gave to Lindsey Graham and Elise Stefanik, a guy from Tennessee, came down and made a bid to take over operations of the marina, fix up the marina to the tune of $30 million, do a 5-year lease. And if at the end of 5 years, the city wants to cut ties, great, we'll buy it back from you, less whatever money you made. and make sure you make 15%, but less whatever money you made, and all the improvements are done, and they get to then go run it themselves or go find another operator to run it, and you got money coming in from slip leases and everything like that. And there's some hiccups in the whole thing, but the city council is not having it. Like they can't get they have to get 6 votes because it's waterfront, but the city council is not getting to 6 votes. They're going to go put it to a referendum on November ballot. So for 25 years, so they're going to let the citizens decide.
Again, I think the politics of St. Pete are so, I would say, a little different than the politics of Tampa, but it's the same pie at the end of the day.
So what's this? If land is waterfront property, anything that's done on it requires how many votes?
So you can only do a lease of waterfront city-owned land
Okay.
for up to 5 years.
Okay.
That's in basically our entire waterfront from the airport, actually past the airport, USF, all the way around to Snell Isle / Old Northeast.
Oh, wow.
So that whole long walkway, that's all city parkland. So if someone wants to go build on it, the city wants to go do that, they can do a 5-year lease, or it goes to referendum for anything longer than 5 years. So you want to go lease to the Rays Rowdies for Al Lang Stadium, so the Rowdies can play soccer there. They get a 5-year lease.
But other lands require less votes, or?
Yeah, I mean, it requires 5 votes of city council to sell a piece of property or lease a piece of property or whatever. Yeah.
Okay. Moving on to something that I think a lot of you have been talking about. Also, I cannot believe we completely forgot about this. But kudos to the Tampa Bay Lightning for winning the Stanley Cup once again. We talked about that already? I don't know if we talked about it. But again, I will keep on talking about it because it was a great back-to-back win. Hopefully it's back-to-back-to-back. But we'll see how that plays out. I think Tampa Bay area has been great for sports when it came to football, winning the Super Bowl. We now 2 times in a row with Stanley Cup, and we won we didn't win the World Championship, but we got pretty close to it. We got to the end with the Rays. But talking about the Rays, I find it comical that we are still talking about this. Since I was in college, we are still talking about this.
You went to college?
No. And so and so the fact that we're still talking about this constantly proves that I don't think anyone wants there to be change when it comes to the Rays. Are we going to keep them or are we not going to keep them? I think a simple yes or no vote needs to be where we're at right now, because I'm just over it.
I'm tired of hearing about it. Hearing about it.
Let's just kind of set the stage of what the conversation is. The Rays started playing in 1997. All right, that's when the team first pitch in Tropicana Field. They had a 30-year lease, a la other long-term leases, 30-year mortgage, 30-year lease on a piece of property from the city. And their binding agreement was that they had to play there for 30 years, and they pay very little to play there. They operate the stadium. They can use it for other purposes, like there was the Christmas thing that they had there a couple years ago and things like
concerts
that.
And everything
Concerts, etc. Motorhome shows. But they had to stay there for 30 years, and for that, they also got half development rights of the entire Tropicana Field site, 86 acres, if any development happened on there within that 30 years. So now you're coming up on the end. That's
2027.
2027 is the last season.
Roughly 5.5 years.
Exactly. Last season, October, November, hopefully November 2027. That could be the last game in Pinellas County, Tampa Bay for the Rays. Now, they could extend it for a year or two if they're close on negotiations or there's something under construction somewhere, and that agreement could change. Like they might have to have a place to play because their stadium might not be ready in another city, and they might be paying a lot of money to play in Tampa. But so it's not that. I mean, I think there's some people that want to see a change. There's a lot of people that don't like the warehouse feel of Tropicana Field. There's the size of it. There's the really poor orientation of it that is not near downtown, but it's also not far enough away that you can have your own district and all that type of stuff. But so there's a proposal kind of on the table. I mean, it's been talked about splitting the season with Montreal. That baseball in Tampa Bay, especially on the Pinellas side of the bay, that there are not enough people within a 1-hour drive that constitute a 81 game a year baseball team, 81 home games a year. Roughly 1 million people come to Rays games a year.
What?
1 million seats get filled.
1 million seats get filled, or
In
1
a
million
year.
tickets get purchased?
In a
81
year.
games. You got 81 games.
I don't know about that.
1 million seats. It's really not that hard to get there.
I don't,
Yeah, it's not. It's not a lot for.
Have you been to a
You got
Rays game
nine-
lately?
you
No,
got-
but
you
it's-
got
but it's-
9 Yankees games, 9 Red
Okay,
Sox games.
that's where you go.
but
you
it's
fill
not-
an entire stadium with the Yankees, yeah.
But I'm just saying, you got 1 million people that are going to come to those games. Okay, if those same million
Come to half the
come
games.
to half the games, and then another million in Montreal go to half the games up there, now you've hit the 2 million number that most of Major League Baseball operates under with their tickets. It takes 2 million people.
I understand the business that business case that you just made. I just don't know that's how fans and teams work. Like, you can't, if you're my team, you can't spend half the year being someone else's team.
In Canada.
Yeah, in another country.
In Canada.
Yeah, like that seems.
That's rough.
I'm just saying it seems odd.
Inappropriate.
It seems a little un-American. It seems a little un-American.
I understand, but let me ask you
Singing
this:
the Quebecs? What is going on?
did you watch the Lightning last year?
Yes.
Where'd they play last year?
They played in two different places because of COVID.
They played in Canada.
Not because, I mean, we have a Canadian team playing basketball here in Tampa.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's COVID.
And
That's not the norm.
and I think you get a pass for that when it's hockey, because it's like, oh, it's hockey, it's Canada. They probably have to do something up there.
Well, they're almost
Like,
all Canadians.
You know,
also.
there's probably they're all Canadians anyway. There's something going on up there, maybe.
But you're
They
not-
have to
but
be
you're
able
not playing baseball
Do they
in-
have to check in or something?
You're not playing baseball in an outdoor stadium
But
in Canada
baseball
in
is
March.
They
Americana.
have to, their
You
passports
can't-
have to get renewed.
Yeah, something like it's like they have some business to do in Canada. And they'll be back.
Well,
Hence
there's a lot
why,
of-
it
like, a
made
lot of
sense,
this is baseball.
hence why it made sense for the Rays to play a game in Cuba,
but it's
because
baseball.
half of them are Cuban anyways.
But let's also split this out, because I mentioned 40 games for a reason, but it's not 40 games. You've got 40 regular season games. They would move spring training up to Tampa,
Yeah.
because their lease in Port Charlotte ends after the 2027 season. They married those two together. They only did a 15-year lease there. So now you bring up roughly 15 spring training games. Also, the spring training facility moves up here. That could be built out in the West St. Pete near Tyrone Mall, where the Rays used to do their spring training for a long time when they played the games at Al Lang. So now you get that area revitalized. You also marry the Rowdies Stadium into the same stadium. So now you've got 41 baseball games, you've got 15 spring training games, then you got 20 Rowdies games. You're getting close to that 80 number before you also create this stadium that is multi-use. You can play lacrosse. There was a lacrosse game at the Vikings practice
I
facility
know
this
what
weekend.
you're.
So-
I know what you're
so-
trying to do and
yeah.
what you're trying to say and what you're pushing. I don't know.
Well, I mean,
I
okay.
don't even know how you build
From
a
St.
team.
Pete's
but I don't know how
standpoint,
you
that
build a
makes
fan
sense.
base when you're no longer here full time. Now you have
See,
two different fan bases.
Same reason that the Yankees, how many Yankees fans only get to go to 15 games?
Yeah,
They
well,
go to every spring
yeah,
training game that
I
season.
will- at the end of the day.
I will say though that you got to think of it like this. I mean, St. Pete, yes, that would work good for St. Pete, and that doesn't address the issue that I brought up about the fans being split and all that. But if you think about it, the future of stadiums is not what it's been in the past, where the taxpayers are going to fork over the
No, it will
equivalent
never happen again.
of the equivalent of 800 million to $1 billion just to build you a single-use stadium. The future,
happen again.
we don't have the land, we don't have the money. The future of stadiums going forward is multi-use facilities where people want to actually be around there, and because you think about most stadiums that I'm used to seeing, the area around the stadium is dead until there's a game, right? And that's not good for business. It's not good for the community. It becomes kind of like living near an airport. It's kind of like no one really wants to live that close to it. So the future is mixed-use facilities, which makes perfect sense. The only question is whether that mixed-use facility is going to be the Rays or not. You know,
I don't-
are they
I
gonna
don't think
stay
the
or
fans are
not?
going- I don't think the
But
fans are gonna go
We're
for it.
not
I
building
honestly don't think it.
Tampa. Hillsborough County's not building them a stadium. We're not.
y'all don't have
We're
the-
not building them.
We have the land to build.
We're
if
not
we
paying
wanted
for
to.
it.
have the money.
We're not
We
paying
are not
for
going to
it.
pay for it.
We're
That's
not
the
paying
point.
for it.
We have the. We can come up with the money. They're taxing us.
We're not
each
paying
and every
for it.
way. We'll always figure out a way. to do it.
Taxpayers, taxpayers are smart to this now.
Well,
they're
now,
not
they'll
about
never-
that.
there will
The
never be a
taxpayers
referendum
are not
again.
about building stadiums anymore. They're just
So
not.
a potential deal for the Rays to stay is that there's a number that Stu Sternberg, I believe, has thrown out there that he's willing to put in. So I forget what number that is, but let's say it's a couple $100 million that he's willing to put into a stadium. They're saying that the stadium would roughly cost $600 million to not have a roof on it.
Which is really $800 million after cost overruns and all that.
Sure.
Unless Trump builds it.
But so
He'll be ahead of schedule on the budget.
Right now, Pinellas County has $200 million available through our bed tax because we've paid off the original Tropicana field. Actually paid it off early. So there's $200 million that is untapped right now that we can do that does not touch one single Pinellas County taxpayer. It's a lot of Hillsborough County taxpayers that go to the beach and stay for the weekend, like Anibal.
I do not stay in a hotel in St.
How
Pete.
many
It's not
business
a Pinellas
owners?
County.
How many business owners get to show up in your town and say, "Hey, everybody, I've arrived, and I'll bring my business here. I just need you to build it for me." You pay for the business, and I'll own it.
Every county does that.
A lot of counties do that.
Every-
a lot of counties do that.
Raymond James.
Raymond James.
I'm
What were we
saying
gonna do
what
for
other.
Amazon?
I'm saying
What have you done for Capital One?
what other business gets to
the
play that
Lighting Arena,
game?
Every one of them.
the Ice
What other
Palace.
business gets to play that game?
Again.
What were we going
at
to do
the-
for Amazon?
Okay.
Oh, we were
all
going to
right,
bend over for
well,
Amazon.
hold on.
That's what they were going to do.
Well, let's compare that for a second. Amazon being is it the largest by market cap now in the world? So you take a company like that who has plenty of money to go buy some former tomato fields in Ruskin, okay, and build a facility. They've got the money to do it.
That felt a little close to home. You okay?
Instead, well, they did. They built a place in Ruskin. What they do is they come in and they get some tax evadance, or they get the county to pay for some of they'll pay for all the sewage and all the development, the roads around it, and they do something like that. And it ends up being a few $1,000,000, like they did for Bass Pro Shops, right? That doesn't change. Amazon's going to put a distribution center where they're going to put a distribution center,
Putting it-
regardless
I'm
of
talking about HQ2.
a couple.
But that's what we're talking about.
What-
HQ2
what-
has an average salary of over $100,000,
Okay,
whereas the
still.
distribution center would only have an average of
but-
$30,000, $40,000.
Okay, where did it end up? In Virginia? Where did it end up?
Yeah,
Okay.
right outside of DC. Shockingly.
Did the taxpayers of the District of Columbia give them $1 billion?
No, Arlington did.
Did Arlington give them $1 billion?
Yeah.
They're going to pay to build the whole entire place.
They're going to. They have their certain incentives.
Or is it tax
There are certain
breaks?
incentives that if Amazon meets those incentives, then yes, they'll bail them out.
Is it tax credits, or they're paying to build the
I
thing?
There's a lot of both.
I wasn't the one that wrote
because
it. But I'm gonna assume yes.
my point is, and I like sports, but somebody comes in who's a billionaire, owns a team, and says to the citizens of the town, if you want me to bring my team here, you're going to build me a $800 million field.
Other towns have done that. Vegas just did it. They just moved. Football
the Raiders
and
Which
and other things.
at best case scenario, if you can fleece the people like that, if you can convince them to do this to themselves, then that's why the future is mixed use. Because no longer can you say, we want $500 million or $800 million for a baseball field. You can't do that.
Well,
but now you have to say, we're going to build a convention center, basically, and we're going to also play baseball there.
So let me throw out this scenario. So imagine a baseball stadium that's also a soccer stadium, that's also a multi-purpose lacrosse, football games that are smaller.
What is lacrosse?
Then the people need to own it. But then the people need to own it. But then the people need to own it.
The people do own it.
What kind of communism is this?
No.
People owning.
Yeah, well, hold on a second.
They do.
Well, now hold on a second. When the federal government gave the taxpayers money to General Motors to bail them out, technically that was the people's money, and it had to go back into the Treasury when they paid it back.
Which they did pay it back.
If the citizens of Hillsborough County are going to build I'm going to call it a convention center because that's the only way you can sell it. If they're going to build a convention center to let all these a sports complex, to allow all these things to happen, then if you ask me, why is it then that all of the revenue generated from there, whether it's parking fees, sales to merchandise, why is all that stuff going to a private corporation? Why wouldn't it be going back to the owners of the...
Because more money is being generated by more business coming to it and having more teams. Again, I don't want to have to cross a bridge to go to a baseball game.
That's always the argument.
And if we can build a baseball team,
and
we can build a race team
I'm all about
in
business.
Tampa, that's perfectly
Just
fine.
live where you vacation.
I mean, at the end of the day...
I'm going to ask a very silly question. How many billionaires live in this area?
I think
Not enough.
one or two.
I know of 4
I know 2.
billionaires.
Yes.
Wouldn't they get involved if they are approached
2 of them are involved.
Those are involved.
to pay it all?
I don't know.
No,
if they are.
so here's the thing. If you're a billionaire, it doesn't mean you have $1 billion cash.
That's right.
And you need cash to go build a stadium.
Right.
If you own a baseball team, let's say the Yankees, which is, I believe, a $5 billion asset.
Yes.
It's only $5 billion if you sell it to someone that's willing to pay $5 billion. You can't go leverage $5 billion
Yeah.
to go build a $5 billion
Yeah,
stadium.
the
if you
teams
want
don't
to.
have that kind of money. They don't
Yeah.
have that
No,
cash.
the,
on hand.
yeah, the owners do not necessarily have the money. I don't know what Stu Sternberg has, but I know that a lot of his wealth is in the Rays because it's grown as an asset from when he bought it to now, which is like
So Matt's making actually a good point. Is that what you're basically saying is that baseball is not profitable enough to afford new infrastructure. Like baseball's not profitable enough, is what he's saying, to build $1 billion
within the
stadium.
4 walls.
Yeah, they like one team, like because you just said the Yankees are valued at $5 billion. That's not a lot.
How
It's
much,
the-
how much
it's
money?
the
How much money
Yankees.
was made by businesses on the Riverwalk?
Yeah, it's the Yankees.
But at
I
the
mean-
end of the day, it is the economic impact that these companies and these sports teams are generating for these cities that increase and build out the
$100 to
economic
$200 million
machine.
a year.
And so that's something that can be qualified and everything else. I say this, let's figure out, I mean, we have the colonel on the board. We can ask him to talk to someone at MacDill to see if we can take a corner of the MacDill Air Force Base and build a stadium on it.
What's
right
up?
there?
What's
we
up
have
with
a
the
stadium.
deal? Yeah,
we can do it there.
I bet they got some space they're not using.
I almost guarantee there's spaces that
It's
they're
in the
not.
coastal
working.
high hazard.
Hey, we wound down
Extra
the
will be-
Middle
don't
East.
take
Hey,
the bill back.
I
water
don't want to
over.
hear anything about coastal hazards from someone that's
Wow.
living
What?
on a peninsula that will turn into 2 islands
Yeah.
the moment a Cat 2 comes into the bay.
Yeah. No, actually, that's not a bad idea. Like, would the federal government like hook your boy up,
Bro.
with like a couple? All we're asking for
If
is
we
a few acres.
We'll talk to God. We'll see what happens this hurricane
But that would-
cycle and see if
That
pushes.
would require
They should've
normal
tried
Tampa
that under
people
Trump.
traveling south of Gandy, and y'all just don't do that.
Should- Should've
let's
tried it.
calm down. One step at a time.
Y'all
Just getting them north
should've
of Kennedy
tried.
is already a problem.
Hey, you know what?
Idiots.
Say pick it up. Hey,
You need a passport.
Should have tried that under Trump. Trump might have bought in on something like that. You should have
we
went to
coulda got
Trump
we
and
coulda
said
got
we want a
federal
little
government
corner
funding.
We want a little the northwest corner of MacDill. Carve that out. He could have helped make that happen, and then St. Pete could have their ferry,
we could
and
do
then
that.
St. Pete could have their ferry that they love.
St.
and
Pete
they could
loves that ferry.
and they could ferry people over to MacDill, and then be excited. because
Matt,
they have a ferry.
If that ferry went to Treasure Island, you'd ride it every day.
No, Treasure Island, please. It needs to go at least one more beach up. So if, Matt Lettelleir, if we could get you your ferry when it comes to the boat, to be able to actually come into Tampa and be profitable, would you be okay with bringing the Rays to Tampa?
Look, I want to keep the Rays in Tampa Bay. That is me personally, and I think that the chamber agrees with that. It is the #1 business retention project in the Tampa Bay area right now.
Will it?
And, I mean,
you
to
said
keep
that's
them
the
here.
St. Pete Chamber's position.
Yeah, the keeping the Rays
In Tampa Bay.
St. Pete preferably, but in Tampa Bay is the #1
Well,
business
why
retention
haven't they been
project.
able to work out a deal? Why is this drag
Well,
going for so long?
again,
there's a lot of
Tampa
politics.
doesn't. We're not going to use Pinellas bed tax money to build a stadium in Hillsborough County.
Okay, got it.
Hillsborough County doesn't have the bed tax base.
But yet,
Got
if
it.
they want to fly out of the Tampa area, they come to
Got
Tampa to fly out. Do you guys have a passport? Have an airport?
Clearwater.
Yeah, they do.
Oh, they have airports?
They have
Do
St.
they have
Pete.
real people flying into
They have
those
St.
airports?
Pete. Allegiant flies out of
Mannequins.
St. Pete,
Allegiant?
right?
Enough said.
And they have
So it's not a real airport.
Clearwater.
So-
it's an airport. And you asked if they have an airport. They have Clearwater.
Southwest started
They
flying
have-
there before they.
That is not helping your argument whatsoever.
Well, of course they don't have a huge airport. I mean, why would they need a huge airport? Tampa's 30 minutes away.
Yeah.
So your answer to though as to why they haven't been able to work out a deal is because St. Pete, understandably, Pinellas isn't going to pay for a stadium in Tampa, and Tampa doesn't have the money to pay for a stadium either in Tampa or in Pinellas.
Well, yeah, Tampa.
They don't,
wouldn't
and they're
pay
not
for
going to do that
Pinellas.
either. So you're saying nobody's got the money?
No,
and they have
Pinellas
to.
has the money. Pinellas absolutely has the money to be able to make this work. It's
In
just
Pinellas.
it's just if we can put together the deal
In
to
Pinellas.
make it work.
But the team can't. But they're having a hard time staying in Pinellas because of the
They don't have the
attendance.
people. They don't have the attendance.
for a full-time.
It just doesn't make sense
30,000
financially.
person stadium.
It just doesn't make
doesn't
sense
make sense.
financially for them to. And see, here's the thing that concerns me about these public-private partnerships and or whatever you want to call
the
these
amount
deals.
of corruption
Okay.
that's already happened without the deal.
Here's what concerns me about it, is that the business people already know what it takes to make it work now and into the foreseeable future. Government doesn't understand business. They will throw money at something to make something happen today. But it wouldn't matter if Pinellas County or Hillsborough or both of them built the best stadium in the history of the world, okay, since the Roman Colosseum. It wouldn't matter. That doesn't change how many people are going to come and buy a ticket to the Rays game. That doesn't create baseball fans. And the people that own businesses understand their business. And so the problem the Rays have may be bigger than any government can fix. And that may be the issue.
But going back to the original point of how a split season works financially, not just for the team but also for the region, is that you then have more fans, especially the wealthier ones. I mean, I know people in Tampa that will fly up to go to a Yankees game and fly back after the game.
That's the Yankees.
Yeah, that's the Yankees, and that's money.
You don't think that they're
Do we have? I think we have enough Ray fans that do that will fit on like.
People go to Yankees games as a tourism event.
Yeah.
Like, I want to go to it like as a bucket list item. Sorry, the
I went
Rays
to
are
a
not on
Mariners-
people's bucket list.
I went to a Mariners game 3 weeks ago as a tourist event.
Ugh.
You love baseball though, right? Are you a baseball fan?
The Rays happened to be playing there at the time, and I went and watched the game.
I'm Hispanic. I have to watch all the baseball games.
That's soccer.
No, I'm Caribbean.
No, Caribbean.
Caribbean is a whole.
Absolutely.
See, you don't even know the sports team. The sports.
Get your culture
of
right.
Caribbean and South Americans.
There is a deal that can be made.
Triggered.
It's time for folks to come to this table. I know that the Rays met with the mayor last week. I know there's a fruitful conversation. There's going to be some deal that comes out. Maybe it won't happen before this mayor's out, but the next mayor, every candidate has said that they are willing to work with the Rays, and they are excited about that. So you've got the county commission that's on board for a certain amount. The city can be on board for a certain amount. And then don't forget, there's this half of the development rights that the Rays own until 2028. So why not maybe give them a little bit now to build their own convention center, build their own hotel. And that now you give them that land that they own. Don't forget, the stadium will be retained by the county. Nobody wants to pay the taxes on owning the stadium. So the county and the city will be the owners of that. But they'll just lease it back to the team for $1 a year or whatever. That makes sense. But if they actually own some property there that they can generate money from that's outside of baseball, that the same ownership group has, hey, now maybe this works out. I can go put a little bit more into the stadium than the 200 I was saying. Maybe it's 250 now. If I got free land to go build a hotel, which by the way, the team would then make every visiting team stay at whatever prices they want them to stay.
I will say this, at the end of the day, I want the Rays Stadium to be built in Ybor City so that it impacts and increases my property value and that I will have to take a trolley to get to Rays games.
Ray Bowl.
So you want to pay for it with taxes.
I think what will probably happen is if it can move into Hillsborough County, they'll create some kind of bond. The people in Hillsborough County are always foo-foo when it comes to their accountability and their accounting. So we'll see what happens there. And at the end of the day, if Pinellas County wants to do something with it, $200 million, they can do something with it. I highly doubt the Rays Stadium is going to stay in St. Pete. I would love it. You give me another reason to cross the bridge because I love crossing the bridge.
I hope I hope the Rays win a World Series. I hope people are happy. I
hope for world peace.
Yeah, I want everybody to be happy. I want the Rays to make money. I want all businesses to make money. But here's what I'm vehemently against from a policy position as a conservative Republican too. A lot of businesses talk about free markets and less regulation when they're growing, right? They want the government out of their way so that they can go make money. But then let them fall on hard times, and now all of a sudden it's socialism, right? So it's free market capitalists on the way up and socialism on the way down, and that's wrong. If you want the government out of your business, then the government needs to stay out of your business. And when the businesses are making money, good, let them make money. Quit trying to take their money. Quit trying to tax them to death, Let them sink or swim on their own. I want businesses to be successful, but I want them to do it on their own. You don't get to keep the people out of your business while you're growing. And then when you fall on hard times and your viewership is down or your attendance or whatever your business is, then you get to come to the people and say, oh, we need your money to keep us in business. And it don't work that way.
But just because I tend to agree with you in a lot of those ways, but you have a Major League Baseball that is saying you can't play in this place anymore. So you don't have total autonomy.
Major League Baseball is saying because they're not making enough money,
because
right?
they're not making enough money on the seats.
Right.
But the Rays make plenty of money on TV.
Yeah.
The team is incredibly successful, incredibly well liked.
But MLB, as an organization, is telling the owners, you guys have got to get out of there. So they're under pressure.
You got to get out of that stadium.
You got to get out of it. Yeah, you got to get out of
that physical.
You got to get out of that
spot.
stadium. You got to come up with something. They want to refresh. They want to refresh so that the team is more profitable.
Yes.
We are
because them being up, the team doing better is better for the MLB. Okay, so once again, MLB is what, a nonprofit, and are they a nonprofit?
It's an oligopoly.
It is an oligopoly, but I mean, aren't they technically a nonprofit?
I love that word.
Aren't they
No,
technically?
NFL is. I'm
the
not sure if
NFL's
MLB
a nonprofit. Is MLB?
I don't know
okay.
if MLB is.
Another big business wanting taxpayers to help them out. I'm just saying.
Again, this is not going
I'm
to get
just saying.
resolved on today's show. This probably will not get resolved until 2027. Honestly, that's probably what's exactly.
I'll just run it. How about that?
Well, you know what?
I'll just
Again,
run it. Yeah,
thank you all for tuning in and watching this riveting conversation about why the Rays will eventually move to Tampa. So again, thank you all for watching the podcast. Again, I'll give you guys a few seconds to think about what one thing that you're thinking about for this week. I can already think and know what Colonel is going to be thinking about or watching about for this week. On their one last thing, for me, the thing that I am really focusing on this coming week is the transitional power of Haiti. I think it's going to be fascinating to see two constitutions duke it out on an election cycle for Haiti, and to see if there's going to be more continuation of gang wars taking over Port-au-Prince. So that's something I'm looking for. I hope will not happen, but I want to see what the week turns out. Joe Wicker, what is one thing that you're looking forward to this week?
Well, I don't know that I'm looking forward to it, but I'm curious to see what's going to happen in Afghanistan, because we're out, we're popping smoke, we're bounding back, we're doing it in the middle of the night, and Afghanis are waking up and saying, well, no more Americans. So we'll see what happens with the Taliban, right? They didn't have to win; they just had to not lose. Yeah. And they, by us leaving, and saying, you guys got to, you Afghanis, you got to run your country, right? Just like we did in Iraq, I mean, I felt like the Iraqis it was a different situation, right? I wasn't surprised when I wasn't surprised when ISIS did what they did in Iraq, because I had worked with the Iraqi security forces, so I didn't have a lot of confidence in them. But I'm not completely down on the Iraqis' ability to run their own country. And even though they're sort of co-opted by Iran and all that, they do seem to have somewhat of a functioning government at some level, okay? But Afghanistan, man, that's a different story. I mean, we know, for anybody that's paid attention, they know it's a different situation. It's a different culture. It's so tribal, above and beyond anything Iraq is, and so rural that I'm just not sure that they're going to succeed. So we'll see what happens, but I'm worried that the Taliban's going to come back in.
I fear that a Vietnam situation is going to occur in regards to when the U.S.
a Saigon event with the helicopter taking off.
I don't know. I mean, it will be as dramatic to the point to where they make a Broadway show of it. But
we got to get the Afghani.
I do think what's happening
out
now when it comes to Afghanistan, that there's already a run on the embassy.
Well, I'm surprised that the Biden administration or any administration wouldn't have already been getting some of the Afghan nationals that were working with us out of that country. I mean, you got to. That was part of the deal. I mean, in Iraq, I think their deal was if they worked with us for 5 years, they got a visa, right? They got a visa to the U.S. It was guaranteed, and I think we pretty much took care of them. I'm hearing this scuttlebutt about the Afghanis not getting taken care of, which is weird to me. We got to get those people out of there. If they worked with the Americans, we got to bring them over. I mean, that was the deal. So hopefully we do that. We honor our commitments to them, and we'll probably have some drone base. I think we're going to run a drone base out of Azerbaijan or Uzbekistan. I forget which country borders them, but we're working with somebody to do a drone base there because we're going to keep watch, obviously.
Yeah, I agree. Colonel, what is one thing that you're looking forward to or looking at for this next coming week?
Definitely, there's a couple of things. I am looking at the Afghani piece because it's very complicated. The attacks are going to come against the United States. You left in the middle of the night. People were actually showing up at the base, Afghanis, and we were gone. And nobody knew, nobody told them that we were leaving. That doesn't look good. The effect on the local population that have had an exposure to American troops for 20 years and then all of a sudden we're gone, it's going to be a negative. People are going to use it against us. However, the one thing that the Trump administration did when he signed the agreements with those key Arab countries, with Israel, is that it keeps them in check as well. They're not going to be as vocal against us. So what you're probably going to get is just Iranian catcalling against the United States for what we're doing in Afghanistan, all fully planned. It was a horrible situation. I don't think it's ever been even remotely close to what Vietnam was, in spirit maybe, but not really. And the other thing that I'm looking at is what you mentioned before. I want to know what happened. What was the structure behind the assassination of the president of Haiti? I can't help but think that it was a practice run for something else. And there have been enough attacks against presidential precedents. The fact that the president of Colombia took shots and we didn't say a word, and he's our number one ally in Latin America, and nobody said anything, concerns me. So I would like to see how that develops. It may not be as nefarious as I probably think it is, but those are the two things that are worrying me.
I think the fact that we haven't had a precedent or even a doctrine when it comes to South and Central America is very concerning, and I think we are now seeing that play out.
Absolutely.
On what's happening, and I don't disagree in your position. I hope that's not the case, but I wouldn't be surprised of what occurred and how stealthy it occurred. And I'm just hoping that I really hope the U.S. government had nothing to do with it. I don't think it did. Honestly.
I don't think we did.
I think there are a lot of more power players in Central America that are really pushing for a toppling and chaos.
Agreed.
I think a lot of people forget money and power are created in chaos. Matt Lettelleir, what is one of your things that you're looking at or forward to this week?
Well, I think that we haven't talked about it at all, but the red tide bloom that's happening in Tampa Bay right now. 110 tons of fish have been pulled out by the city of St. Pete. Public works workers and private contractors, fish nets are going out to collect these fish. It's bad, and people can blame Piney Point. People can blame just the timing of Elsa coming through, the way she came through and pushed into the bay, and pushed those fish in. But it's bad. Our fishing just going out in the bay, you can't. People were crossing over to go to the lightning parade today, and it was just they're cutting through dead fish as they're trying to cut across the bay. So credit where credit's due. Public Works are working really hard to get that done. I know the state's working with the county to provide some support. So just hopefully that awful stench and the allergen that is the red tide goes down this week. That's really like the biggest thing that we're talking about in St. Pete right now.
This really does take multiple years of establishing new patches of seagrass and creating the environment that allows for more oxygen to be put into the waters, but then also controlling the pollution that is being dumped into the city. And I think that's something that this mayor was being hit on for a while now, the mayor of St. Pete, a little bit. When I think there was a dumping
but
situation.
Remember, red
Yeah,
tide is also naturally occurring.
Yeah, it's been around for hundreds of
Red
years.
red tide comes from the Saharan desert.
I understand. I understand all that.
All
what
right.
I'm saying is that there are things that we can do to take steps to ensure the health.
The
and
blue-green
safety-
algae
the
is the
health
stuff
and
that
safety
we're.
of our waterways.
Well, we should always do that, but blue-green algae is the stuff that we're more responsible for. The red tide is going to happen no matter what. So.
You mean the Indian River stuff on the East Coast?
the blue-green algae in the river, that's runoff from the from all of this fertilizer from the HO8 neighborhoods. But no, red tide has always been around. It's naturally occurring, but never, the media and politicians and leftist environmentalist groups are going to definitely use it as an opportunity to push their agenda, but it's naturally occurring. I mean, it's...
Again, thank you all so much for watching The Yard Signs, the most important and relevant podcast on the internet. I thank you all for joining us today and watching. Again, thank you all the guests that were able to come on, Mr. Lettelleir, Colonel, and Mr. Wicker. Thank you guys so much for coming on. Again, I've been your host, Anibal David Cabrera, and I'm honored to be able to talk to you guys today. Thank you all, and have a blessed day.
Go Rays, go Bolts.
Go Rays.
Go Bucks. Go Bolts.